During today's webinar, I'm excited to be joined by Sam Jackson. He's one of our solutions architects, and he's just kindly joined me today to talk through this Microsoft Security and Business Premium. Now, for today's agenda, we are going to be going through the usual news, overview of Microsoft Business Premium licensing, the security features and a breakdown of the solution and how it can help you. And then we'll finish off the session with questions and answers. Again, please feel free to type in the questions and answers that you have as we go along, and we will endeavour to answer all of the questions. Right, as normal, we have our monthly news, and let's just talk through some of what's been happened for people who's not aware. We have our pricing promotions. So at the moment, Microsoft is still providing 15% discount for organizations that's moving to M365 E5 no Teams if you haven't had it before. So that is quite an attractive promotion. Be aware as well, there's an increase on the 1st of April of 5%. This is for yearly commit monthly payments. So if your renewal is due before the 1st of April, you take advantage of avoiding the price increase. After the 1st of April, there is some price changes. Microsoft has also announced that M365 E5 compliance is available at 50% discount for all users who's got Copilot already, and you can match that license with the number of Copilot licenses you have. A few other bits and pieces to make you aware is the compliance portal has been retired, so everybody's now into the Purview portal. Get yourself familiar with it and have a look around the Purview portal. A number of new features being deployed constantly. We've also seen that SharePoint Agents has gone live in SharePoint, which is effectively an agent on every SharePoint page or site if you have Copilot. This is on by default with those agents limited to the information that is on that site. This is quite useful for organizations that wants to make it available to the team and might not have a Copilot license for everybody. You can link that into your Azure consumption at 1 cent per question or a penny a question if we work on Sterling. Finally, for organizations that uses Viva Learn, please be aware that the Copilot Academy is available. Go and explore that. It's got a number of scenarios that is very useful. Training videos for admins, training videos for users on how to use Copilot for M365, how to get the most out of it, and how you can use it on your day-to-day operations. There's significantly other news as well, but we'll try and keep that covered as we move along. Now, for today, we are covering Microsoft Business Premium, which is effectively aimed at organizations sub 300, which provides all of the security features that's in the enterprise licenses, but makes it available to organizations, smaller organizations. And as I mentioned, I'm joined today by Sam Jackson, our solutions architect, who will be running you through the features and benefits of leveraging Business Premium for organizations with up to 300 users. Thank you very much for joining us today, Sam.
Thank you very much, Adrian, and thank you everyone for joining. So what we'll do throughout this presentation is I want to take you guys through the journey of Business Premium in a deployment aspect. So within the Business Premium license, what you'll see is it covers off 5 different pillars within the Microsoft security landscape. So those 5 key pillars are identity and access management. So that's your Entra ID and your users. Your endpoint and app management, so that's your Intune, that's your BYOD devices and your MDM platform. Your threat protection, that's your Defender for Business, Defender for Office, Defender for Cloud Apps Discovery, and various different controls within the threat protection as well. And then we move into the data, so your information protection and your data lifecycle management. And that's a big topic at the moment with Copilot and AI being so prominent in the industry. And lastly, what we'll touch on as well is Sentinel, SIEM, and having a service like Secure 365, which is a 24/7 MDR eyes on. So to break down these pillars into a little bit more detail, what you'll see here is we'll go through the motions. So in the top left, you've got your Entra ID P1, which is your identity. That's your user provisioning. That's your conditional access policies, your Windows Flow for Business, and your single sign-on. So your user identities is the provisioning of a user, similar to a traditional Active Directory. Your conditional access is the ability to evaluate and control access to your Entra ID environment. And your Windows Flow for Business and single sign-on is also the ability for you to move to more of a passwordless environment, so removing the need for passwords flowing about. We'll then move on to the device element, which is your Intune aspect. So that's your MDM, your mobile application management for BYOD devices, and we'll also touch on a little bit about autopilot as well for automated device builds. We'll then move into the bulk of the threat protection, so that's your Defender for Business or Defender for Endpoint 1.5, your vulnerability management, your Defender Exploit Guard, which is also known as your attack surface reduction rules, your Defender for Office Plan 1, which is your mail filtering, and then your Defender for Cloud App Discovery as well. We'll then touch on the information protection and data lifecycle management. So that will cover off your manual, default, and mandatory sensitivity labeling, your DLP policies around those labels, and then your manual retention labels as well. So maintaining data for X amount of time and cleaning up from a hygiene aspect when we need to. Then lastly, we'll look at SIEM, so your Security Incident and Events Solution with Microsoft Sentinel, and then a service such as Secure 365 as well for all of that log collection and triaging. So to get started, we'll look at identity and access management. So Entra ID is the identity provider or IDP solution for Microsoft. It provides the ability to provision user accounts and leverage various different controls within the 365 or Entra landscape. One of the key features is Entra ID protection. Entra ID protection allows yourself and the wider organization to evaluate risky users, risky sign-ins, and other strange behavior which you typically wouldn't be able to identify in a traditional Active Directory because those controls just aren't there. You do get a wide range of other controls as well, such as Windows Hello for Business, so using PIN or biometrics to move away from that plain text password, self-service password reset, a really good one for removing the need of those typical sticky notes of administrators, here's your new password and things like that. It allows the user to securely reset or change their password without needing to go to IT to ask them to reset it and then send them the password maybe in Teams or something like that. Now, a common misconception with Entra is that, oh, my organization is too heavily reliant on the domain and we're all AD joined machines, we're all AD users. Well, that doesn't actually matter. On the right, what you'll see is Entra Connect Sync. Now, what that does is it synchronizes up the on-premise Active Directory user accounts and device objects into Entra, so you can begin to leverage the controls in Entra without having to transition fully to an Entra ID cloud-based only organization. Now, we call that hybridization. To touch on a bit of conditional access, so I get asked a lot of the times, what is conditional access? Well, conditional access is effectively a set of policies which is consistently evaluating and controlling access to your organization's resources, and this typically works off of a zero trust model. It only allows validated and trusted devices or users connected through a set of policies to the environment. So a good example of this is I have a Windows device. The policy will say, we have a Windows device. Is it compliant or is it hybrid enrolled? If it is compliant or it is hybrid enrolled, then grant access. Because at that point, we know that the device has had to be enrolled into Intune to get a compliance policy, or the device had to been hybrid enrolled from AD Connect from my on-prem Active Directory. So we must be in control of that device. However, if the device isn't compliant or it's not hybrid enrolled, then challenge MFA. Because at that point, we know that that must be a BYD device, which isn't enrolled into Intune, and it's not on our Active Directory, so we're not in control. So we need to challenge MFA. Effectively, conditional access policies are if, else, and then statements, similar to the programming language. If this, then do that, do this, grant that. One other thing within conditional access is you have the ability to control the session as well. So a typical session control would be an administrative user has gone to portal.azure.com. That user is signed in with their global admin account. Well, we can put a session control in there and say that user can have no persistent browser session and has to re-authenticate after 4 hours. So we've got control within the session. Intune. So I'm sure a lot of people have heard about Intune. Microsoft Intune, or otherwise known as Endpoint Manager, is the device management solution from Microsoft. Now, what you'll see on the left-hand side there is typical device controls you'd find in a lot of MDM products. You've got the ability to retire, wipe, delete, sync your device. You can restart, collect diagnostics, a fresh start, or an autopilot reset, and a lot more. So you've got your typical device controls, not only for Windows, but for Mac, iOS, and Android. It covers all of those platforms to a great deal of control. What you'll see at the bottom is the computer compliance. So you heard me just reference conditional access policy around computer compliance. What's really good in Microsoft is that they will layer and leverage all of the different features and controls within the Business Premium license. So you can define a compliance policy. We've got BitLocker, simple passwords, minimum password length. These are all things that I require my devices to have enabled on their device or within a length of password in order for them to connect to my environment. Maybe I've got an ISO compliance, or maybe I've got cyber essentials that I need to have those policies in place for. On the right hand side, you've got your update rings. So your update rings are the ability to automate OS updates on a Windows device. You can now extend this to Macs as well. So a Windows device, in terms of the update ring, you can define whether you want to be pushing a KB for a patch, whether you want to do a feature update, your Windows 10 to 11, your 21H1s, your 22H3s, all your driver updates as well. Now, a good practice for this is don't have everyone in one update ring, because if a bad update goes out, well, you're going to get a call pretty quickly that all of the devices have gone wrong. So you can put in multiple different rings, so maybe a beta ring, a production ring, or an early adopters ring. Now, within the rings, just quickly, you can see there that you can define the quality update deferral. So you can put a bit of control back in the end user's hand. Well, I've got a meeting in an hour, I can't do an update now, it might not be done. You can give them the option to defer. You can also set your maintenance times. So maintenance times are hours outside of the typical working day where the device can automatically install the update. And then lastly, you've got the deadlines. The deadlines typically set to something like 14 days, because if you're abiding by a standard such as Cyber Essentials, well, these updates need to be done within 14 days, otherwise we're not compliant with our certifications. So you can enforce that into users without pushing them to do it too aggressively so they can defer. Now, a fan favorite, app protection. So what is app protection? App protection is the ability to containerize an application or the data within an application on a personally owned device without it being enrolled into Intune. Now, in this day and age, and I know for myself, I can't stand having two mobile phones anymore. Back in the day, I used to have three, so I much prefer to have my one single device. However, what you'll find, I'm sure this has been raised before, that you may have a BYD policy. And that BYD policy says, yes, you can use your mobile device, but it needs to be enrolled into our Intune. But a lot of the response you get there is, I've just paid £1,000 for this new iPhone 15. I don't want it to be enrolled in under the management of someone else. So a nice halfway house is app protection policies. App protection policies allow the organization to put controls around the apps and data. For example, on the right, you can see on my phone that I've got a PIN enforcement. You can also have biometrics, Face ID, fingerprint. You can have conditional launch. So if a PIN has been entered into my Outlook application incorrectly 3 times, then wipe the data. Well, if the device is jailbroken, then block access entirely because it's a risk. So you get that halfway house between being able to control the data, control the app, but not having the device enrolled, and that keeps a lot of users happy. And another one just to mention as well is you can do encryption on backups, block the ability to back up to iCloud in terms of corporate data. And lastly, a lot of the questions we get asked is, well, I use Outlook for my personal account. App protection policies won't affect your personal account. It's all done on the corporate account level. Autopilot. I'm sure everyone's heard about Autopilot, and we'll run through it quickly. So Autopilot is the ability to automate device builds. Incredibly useful. It can help you move away from things like MDT or the typical build desks, the one that I'm in right now, where you get the USB stick out, you flash it, you build it, take the time away. We don't need to be moving in that direction anymore. There's 2 different deployment options. You've got your user-driven and you've got your self-deploying. So a user-driven deployment method is where you still have a level of control within the end user. So typically, if you're doing a user-driven deployment, that might be an IT administrator. The IT administrator can still have a level of control over the device as it's going through the out-of-box experience and the autopilot build phase. Self-deploying, or otherwise known as white glove, is what's meant to be the end-to-end, completely hands-off transition of a complete device build. Now, the way that this all works is you extract what we call the hardware ID or the hardware hash. You upload that into your 365 tenant. You can then assign that device to your autopilot profile, whether that be user-driven or self-deploying, and then that will kick off at the point of launching the device. Now, with white glove, if you have got a cooperating vendor, you can do this in-house. You can purchase a device from a vendor and probably pay a little bit extra, 10, 15 quid, and they will input the hardware ID into your tenant, add it to the group, package it all up, they'll send it to the end user, the end user will open up the device, sign in, and off they go, they're ready to work. So that it removes that whole, well, I've joined a new company, my device has arrived on Monday morning and I haven't been able to start working till lunch. So it's really, really useful. So next, if we move on to threat protection. So threat protection in the Microsoft Business Premium license is fantastic. You'll see on the previous slide when we're going through the pillars just how many threat protection products you get within there. So on the screen what you can see is Defender for Business and Defender for Office. Defender for Business is effectively a mix between Defender for Endpoint Plan 1, Defender for Endpoint Plan 2. Now what Microsoft has done is they've taken the powerful tool known as automated investigation out of Defender for Endpoint Plan 2 and moved it into its own middleman license. Now that is gold dust, because that is what really provides the power to the Defender for Endpoint Plan 2 license. So you get that for a much cheaper range to what the Business Premium license is. Now what you'll see on the left hand side is an example of an incident that's happened. So on the bottom you can see just how powerful the investigation is. We're looking at DLL files, we're looking at executables, we're looking at URL rewrites. And by the way, if you look on the left, this is all real time. So if you do have an incident that's occurred and I want to know when it happened, okay, 9:05 this happened, what happened before it, what happened after it, gives you loads and loads of great detail into exactly what happened. Now on the right hand side, what you can see is an automated investigation. Now this is where the Defender for Business or the Defender for Endpoint agent has gone away and hunted around the environment, including the device, to understand exactly what's gone on and what evidence I have to prove that this was a real life threat. You can see here on the left hand side, there's been over 1,000 entities analysed by the device across drivers, files, document libraries, loads of different areas. You can see the device on the top left and you can see when the alert's been received. Now at the end of that, you can see the evidence has been collected and there's been a result. It's been terminated by system. So it's great. It's found it, it's inspected it, it's worked out what's going on and it's sorted it out for you. Now on the right hand side there, you can see that you've also got the ability to isolate devices. You can launch automated investigations, run antivirus scans as well. So you do have the ability to control the device and isolate it if you do need to. Now, one thing just to touch on quickly as well is that within Defender, when you're on board Defender, you don't need to remove your existing antivirus. You can maintain your existing antivirus, and Defender will onboard into passive mode. And when in passive mode, the Defender platform will still do your vulnerability scanning. It will still look at what's going on, but it won't do anything. It won't remediate for you. It will trust that your existing antivirus product will remediate for you. However, at the point of removing your antivirus, Defender will immediately kick in and then start to remediate as it can. Vulnerability management. So, vulnerability management is great in Microsoft. I'm a big fan of it. So what you see on the screen is just one of the dashboards within the vulnerability management platform at security.microsoft.com. So you have your secure score. Your secure score is effectively an overall score of your environment against Microsoft and other organizations of your size and industry based off of the amount of weaknesses, CVEs, security recommendations that have been implemented, just an overall view of your estate. You've got your exposure distributions. Exposure distributions are the amount of weaknesses and CVEs across your device estate. Out-of-date software. What software is out of date? Why is it out of date? Do we need to look at a third-party patch management solution? Or what are our top exposed devices? There's always that one user that doesn't update the device. Well, maybe we need to have a word and say, look, can you please start updating your device in terms of your third-party products? It's a really good bird's eye view to get a good understanding of what's going on. Just to dig a little bit deeper into vulnerability management as well. So on the left-hand side, you've got the exposure score. So the exposure score in your environment will be based off of your low, mediums, and highs, and it will give you a nice little chart at the bottom there of how you're getting on. It's really quite good at telling you how well you're doing in this journey and reducing your attack surface of your estate. Now at the top, now this is really useful if you do something like Cyber Essentials Plus. So you can see the CVEs in your environment, 379 vulnerabilities. We've got 6 criticals. Well, if I'm doing Cyber Essentials Plus and I know that in a couple of weeks' time they're going to come in and audit my devices and they're going to be vulnerability scanning for all of my CVEs and weaknesses, well, why don't I spend a bit of time going through this dashboard and actually finding out what they're going to find? Because at the point that they come in and start testing everything, they're going to tell me I need to remediate that and I need to do it pretty quickly or else I'm going to fail. So if I can use this dashboard ahead of time to go through a patch cycle, to update all of the devices, that when they come in to do the audit, they'll find 1 or 2 or 3 or maybe 4 across all of the devices they're testing, and they're in and out within a couple of hours and we've passed. It's really useful. The last bit there is initiatives. Now, initiatives is quite new within the Security Centre. Initiatives is effectively a way of presenting secure school recommendations to you without you having to go through the long list of different security recommendations. This categorises them into more business level initiatives. So you can see there you've got your SaaS security. Well, we're at 68% of our SaaS security, so maybe we need to address that and have a look at what recommendations we need to implement to improve our organisation in the world of SaaS. Same with enterprise IoT and same with the CIS framework as well. So it allows you to structure an internal project, or at least structure a timeline of where we want the business to get to and what do we need to do to get the business there. You've also got threat protection in terms of Cloud App Discovery. So what Cloud App Discovery does, Cloud App Discovery will identify the world of SaaS in your environment. Now, in this day and age, pretty much every product you use will have some form of a SaaS-based product. It will have a web-based version that's great, it's really lightweight, and you access it through this client in the web. That's fantastic, but with all of this going on, a lot of the time you don't actually know where or what or who is accessing what. And Cloud App Discovery does this really well by presenting this to you. So it allows yourself as an organization to get an insight into the different apps being accessed, how much gigabytes of traffic, what user, what's the geographical region, is it a lot of social media? So it's really useful to get that bird's eye view. You can look at your IPs, discovered apps, IP addresses, all of that good stuff. However, if you really do want to leverage Defender for Cloud Apps, then you will need to look at getting an add-on. Within the Defender for Cloud Apps add-on, you have the ability to implement more CASB controls, so implementing session controls, block downloads, block uploads, and that integrates as well with your conditional access. So that is an additional license, but the Cloud App Discovery is a great way to maybe address, do we have an issue arising here? Information protection and DLP. So information protection and DLP. At the moment, all you hear about is Copilot and AI, and everyone's concerned about their data. Smaller organizations who may not have information protection, DLP controls, they don't have those in place, but they're really keen to get to use Copilot because it's got all these functionalities that would be great for my business, but we're worried about our data. The compliance team or the finance team are worried about the data. We've got an on-prem file server and we don't know where everything is. Well, Business Premium covers you for that. It gives you the ability to label your data. So what you'll see here is a set of labels: public, personal, confidential, general, highly confidential. Now, these are sensitivity labels. What they are is the ability to label emails and files based off of a framework. So when it comes to labeling, it's really important to engage with the wider organization to understand what is our framework. And that is largely one of the harder points to do. What is the framework? What do we classify our data with? And what are the controls we need around it? What's highly confidential? What's highly confidential that can't leave the organization? Or what's highly confidential but can leave the organization? And what do we need to do to secure it? Microsoft Business Premium gives you that. You can customize your DLP controls. So you can say it can't be sent, an email can't be sent externally to anyone beyond the recipients that have received it. You've also got your retention labels. So your retention labels allow you to retain or move on data after a certain period of time. Now, why this is really useful is because in a typical file server world, we've all been there. We've had a file server for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and all we've done is upgrade it again and again and again. And we've got about 10 terabytes of data on a file server, and no one knows who's got access to what, where it all lives, and what do we do with any of it. Now, retention labels are really good because it allows you to keep that hygiene up without having to worry too much. For example, say you've got your SharePoint environment and you've got your 4 terabyte quota. Well, we want to stay under that 4 terabyte quota, so we don't need to spend any more money. Well, if we put retention in and we say, okay, well, any of these documents can be deleted after 7 years, I'll stick a retention label on that. Then I know that after 7 years, I can get rid of it and that my 4 terabytes is not being capped and it's not being hit because we've got our retention labels. Now, what I will mention as well is there's 2 different types of retention policies you can create. You've got adaptive and static. Now, what adaptive is, the adaptive label is a label that is assigned to something like a property, so a department or a site URL. For example, maybe you've got a finance department site URL where you've got all your finance data. Well, that needs to be saved for at least 7 years. So maybe we should put a sensitivity label on there so that we know that my adaptive label, wherever anything goes into that site URL, is going to be retained for X amount of time, so I know I'm not going to lose it. You've obviously got your backups and things like that as well if you need it. And then your static is just a manual policies that apply to a label on the fly. Now, that's all well and great having all of that, but again, if you go back to a typical file server, you don't know where everything is. There's no way to really have a look. You know, you might use a third-party tool like TreeSize where you have a look and say, okay, well, I've got 15 terabytes and it's all broken down into finance. What do I do about that? Well, Purview is great at giving you what I call the bird's eye view of your data. So what top sensitivity labels are being applied in my organization? Why is highly confidential the highest amount? We don't really deal with highly confidential. Well, that might be an end user training exercise. Maybe they've not understood what that means. You can look at the distribution between your platforms, so SharePoint Online, Exchange, OneDrive. Where are my labels being applied? Well, I'd hope a lot of my emails within Exchange and SharePoint are being labeled because that's where we can be sharing data, same with OneDrive. And then your sensitivity label coverage. You can see there we're at 100%. But what if I've got data that's not labeled? If we're abiding by an ISO standard, then we need to have all of our data labeled. Otherwise, they could argue we're not in control of that piece of data because it's got no policies surrounding it. And then lastly, on that right-hand side, you've got Data Explorer. Data Explorer, as it says, allows you to explore data within your 365 Purview compliance world. So you can drill down into your OneDrive, your SharePoint. Where's my national insurance number lives? What highly confidential data do I have? Where has it been assigned? Has something been incorrectly assigned? It's really useful if you think to a traditional file server. Unless you've got a third-party product, it's pretty much a no man's land in terms of figuring out where all my data is and what do I do with it. Now, lastly, to touch on is Sentinel and in particular Secure 365. So within Sentinel, first of all, what is Sentinel? Sentinel is the security incident and event management solution by Microsoft. It is where you can ingest all of your log feeds from all of those Defender products, your Entra ID, and anything else that spits out a log into Microsoft Sentinel so you can review and triage the incidents and alerts. Now, on that left-hand side, it's just a good example of a data connector. A data connector is effectively how you get data from a product into the environment. And you can see here within the data types, there's various different data types in that one XDR platform. You've got security incidents, alerts, device events, device file events, device image load events, device events. So many different events, and that's just within that small connector alone, which is great because you want to adopt everything into Sentinel. You want to have that 90-day retention of an incident and alert in case we need it. However, the management of that is quite a lot, especially if you do go through the 5 pillars. You implement your Entra, you implement your Intune, you go down the data side of things and you build out those threat protections. That's where a service like Secure 365 comes into play. A 24/7 MDR eyes on that will always look at every single incident alert from every single security product, platform, Entra, whatever it may be, and they will triage it and they will figure out, do we need to isolate a device? Do we need to use that Defender for Business deployment to isolate the device? Do we need to use the Defender for Office to isolate the mailbox, stop mail flow? It's really, really useful. Now, I just wanted to touch on a bit of a deployment approach of how I personally would go through this and how it works from a project aspect. So the first thing I'd do if I was going through a deployment approach is I'd look at my identity. It's the first thing I need to do. Is my organization Entra ID joined, or are we still reliant on the on-prem AD with the domain controllers? Either way, it doesn't really matter. I can hybrid sync my users up and I can hybrid sync my devices into Intune, and I'm ready to go from that aspect in terms of my configuration. Intune device enrollment, well, let's enable enrollment. let's hybrid sync my on-prem devices in, or let's enroll my devices from Entra into there. At that point, I've already gained a significant amount of benefit to control. I've got more control over my users. I've got more control over my devices, and all I've done is click a few buttons and get everything configured and adopted, and off you go. Now, at the point of Intune having devices enrolled, I'm able to then integrate Defender for Endpoint. You can integrate Defender for Endpoint into the Microsoft Intune platform, and you can begin to adopt additional controls such as that exploit guard, implementing what we call security baseline, your attack surface reduction roles, schedule scan times, and all of that. So it integrates really, really nicely, and it goes back to that seamless approach of one pane fits all. So once I've got my identity in place, my users are secure, I've got my conditional access for my administrative users, I know that my devices are compliant or hybrid enrolled, got my Intune device in there, fantastic. I've integrated it into my threat protection. I've done a basic configuration of my Defender for Endpoint service. Well, now great, okay, that ticks those 3 boxes. You then move on to your data governance. Okay, I need to build the framework, open up to the wider organization. Let's have a look at what we've got. Let's put an exercise in place where we can identify data, identify where it is, what's our framework, what needs to be classified. Once you've got all of that, start getting it into SIEM. Adopt a service like Secure 365 or 24/7 MDR monitoring. And at that point, you've taken yourself from having minimal control, not really leveraging Entra, not really leveraging 365, and not leveraging the business premium license at all, really. You can alleviate so many different third-party products just from a single license, and that's why it's such a bargain. Lastly, to summarize, so like I say, transform the entire IT estate with a single license. It's all you need is that single license, and it will cover off your AV, your third-party AV. Okay, you can get rid of it. Your third-party mail filtering, okay, I can get rid of it. Your third-party MDM, I can get rid of it. It's fantastic. It's in one license. It's single pane of glass. Reduce the cost on the third parties, like I say. Remove some of those invoices that you have to keep scanning, or new contract agreements that you have to keep running through. Why has it gone up? And one pane of glass and better integration. You'll see as you go through the deployment that it all integrates really, really well. Although it may be in a different portal, it does integrate really, really well. Now, the last thing is, if anyone does want to have a bit of more of a deep dive into maybe the configuration of Intune or Defender for Endpoint, or how can we leverage the synchronization service through AD Connect, please do reach out. Some really good points we can make in there, and we can set a workshop up. Adrian?
Thank you very much, Sam. That was very useful. For my own peace of mind, I know you touched on Defender for Business and Defender for Office, but I think if I understood this correctly, Defender for Endpoint or Defender for Business covers the endpoint. Do you just want to maybe clarify for me what Defender for Office actually does and which area it addresses from a security point of view?
Yeah, so your Defender for Office is your mail filtering solution. So where you may have something like Mimecast on your MX gateways, you can flip that to your protection.outlook.com, and then all of your mail filters will go through Defender for Office, where you have your anti-phishing, your anti-spam, your anti-malware, impersonation protection, and all of that good stuff within there as well.
And does it also cover then my Teams? Because I've been seeing that the latest threats that we are seeing is apparently being directly messaged via Teams, for example. I'm seeing more of this coming up in the news regarding risks. Is that covered as well, or do I need a separate product?
No, that's it. It's all included. So safe links and safe attachments are included. So let's just say, Adrian, if you were to send me a link in Teams and I opened up that link, it would do a URL rewrite in the browser, and it would scan that link to make sure it's not malicious. It covers off your SharePoint aspect as well.
That makes sense. So if I can summarize from what you said, is with the Defender for Business or Business Premium license, we can effectively replace get best-in-class antivirus, email protection, email filtering, data compliance, get our Outlook, get our mobile device management, can get rid of that as well. So it feels a little bit like it's all in the box. Now, can I just clarify, does it include backups, or because I keep hearing this information that we don't need backups?
It doesn't include backups, but you have retention in terms of SharePoint, so not backups as such.
So would you still recommend we have backups?
Of course, yes.
Fantastic. I've got a few final questions that has just come through. What happens if we mix Defender for Business with Defender for Endpoint P2. So it looks like some people are mixing M365, E5 or E3 with Business Premium. What is the actual impact of that?
So if you've got a mixture of Defender for Business and you've also got the Defender for Plan 2 in like an E5 license, for example, then the whole service downgrades to the lowest tier license, which in this case would be Business Premium. So you would want to marry that up and ideally increase your Defender for Business into the Defender for Endpoint Plan 2, so you've got the same coverage across the estate.
Everything that you've covered so far is to do with the end user. What happens if I've got service? How would I actually cover the service in this case from a security point of view?
So you have Defender for Server as well, Defender for Server Plan 1 and Plan 2, and they're onboarded into Defender in a similar way via group policy or script to onboard those. Typically, what we do nowadays, if they're an on-prem server, we'll use Azure Arc to bring them up into the Azure subscription, enable Defender for Server Plan 1 or 2 in the cloud. However, if they are already in the cloud, you can enable it on there as well and still leverage the same controls, vulnerability management, and your threat protection as well.
Okay, and last few questions. If from a security point of view, Defender for Business, does it just work on Windows or does it cover Apple, Android, all of the other, Linux, for example?
It can be onboarded. There are some limitations when it comes to certain platforms, but ultimately across the board, Defender covers all of them. But I can check for you on the limitations on some of the other platforms.
Fantastic. I'm just going to see a follow-up question that we just got. When running a third-party antivirus together with Defender for Endpoint in passive mode, is there any consideration on the device resource usage spiking, for example, CPU performance, memory performance?
You can have a slight increase with the performance on the device. Typically, you will see more of a performance more of a performance hit or resource usage on the device when you've got more of the attack surface reduction rules and the device is in active mode. So I wouldn't be too concerned around performance with it in passive mode.
Fantastic. Can I just clarify from a personal point of view, would you recommend running a different antivirus solution with Defender for Business or just running Defender for Business long term? What's your view?
My view is if you look at the Gartner quadrants and you look at the top right, Microsoft has been leading there for a long time. For the cost that you can save on an antivirus, I mean, ultimately, if you were to go and get Defender for Business, which is already in your license, 9 times out of 10 is going to be just as good or not better than your existing antivirus. So why not save the money on that third-party product and leverage Defender for Business, not let alone the additional controls you get with the attack surface reduction rules, the vulnerability management, and the integration with other services like Defender for Office or device risk scores and things like that.
Thank you very much. I think we don't, I'm just going to give it one more minute for any further questions, but thank you very much, Sam. For everybody, thank you very much for joining us today. Again, as I say, please feel free to send more questions, connect to us on LinkedIn. Happy to continue this conversation. If there was any questions in there that was you didn't want to ask forward from a point of view. And also, please make sure to register for our next event. We will be having a next CISO workshop on the 26th of March. We will confirm what we'll be covering. Please also provide us any feedback and any other topics that you would like to see in the future. But thank you very much for joining us and look forward to seeing you next time.